Job next.
That's the other book. That's so weird.
Well, while we're in the wisdom literature, we might as well make a clean sweep of it. All right, thank you for anyone joining us online. We are here in Topeka and ready to start our second session only of this class where we go over Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. One second. So we are starting in chapter 3 for this, our second class, and we'll start as we always do with the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok v'divrei Torah. If you say Amen, you get full credit. And so we started last week with learning from Kohelet, who was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and we can understand Kohelet essentially to be King Solomon. And so King Solomon is teaching us about all the things that he has learned through his great wisdom, knowledge, and discernment, wisdom being knowledge and discernment, essentially, that through all his pursuits, whether he pursued vanity for its own sake, whether he pursued pleasure and non-frivolousness, he found that there was no satisfaction in that. That doesn't prevent one from suffering the kind of torment of the soul that comes with examining how one lives a life. And he says this is natural that it happens and that one has to find a way to ameliorate it. And perhaps the only way one can is to, what he essentially suggests, though not in these words, is a combination of being satisfied with one's portion and attempting to spend one's life doing good and enjoying the fruits of one's labor. Now, of course, doing good, the rabbis will interpret to mean doing mitzvot, doing things that are good for you, good for your family, good for the community, good for the world, commandments by God. But in a general sense, still, it's important to look at it from a universal perspective. Okay, so that's where we are, and now we're going to get some additional wisdom with something you've all seen before, probably in one form or another, whether it was in song or in poetry or maybe just these words exactly as they are. We can go over like the translations if you want, because not everything is not all, the translations aren't always perfect. But we start L'chol Zman Ve'et, and I was mentioning this is the Reform Movement's newest rabbi's manual is named L'chol Zman Ve'et. So for every or in every, to every time and appointed time, Zman and eight, or L'chol Chayfetz Tachat Hashemayim. There is an experience or a opportunity or something like that under heaven, right? So a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, which we understand that, how do you take that phrasing?
I had cheated and looked at my note.
Okay, cool.
It says everything is ordained or preordained. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way.
I wouldn't, but again, not in any way that violates free will. It's not preordained in a kind of predestination way. That's not what it is. That, yes, that is, your note is correct. As my note has for us too. There is an appropriate time for all things that are ordained by God. These are good things and bad things, but they're natural things. That's the important thing to take from it, I would think. The ordained by God aspect is important because you can see holiness. You can see God in all of these things, even the bad ones, right? Because we can understand that there's we can understand kind of the necessity for us to have as part of our understanding of reality and how God plays into it, that if all these things are natural and can occur, they do so in kind of a blind manner. And they can't be. It's not about. Yeah, I'm losing myself on this. Okay. So you're right that it's got that all these human experiences are things. So what are some of these human experiences? We're going to get many of them here. They're going to be, and these are all, we get eights. These are these uh, appointed times, such to say, a time for birthing and a time for dying. Laledet could also be like for like for like human development. Um, right. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot the planted, uprooting the planted. A time to kill, laharog, to murder almost. Yeah, it's a time to kill. The eight, lirpo, you know that from like refuah shlema. Refuah is the same root, so a time to heal. A time to tear down, to literally leave throats, to breach, but that would be like breaching a wall, right? And you would like knock it down a little bit. That's what we're getting there. So a time to for tearing down, and a time to build up. The eighth leave note, like Bonei Yerushalayim, right? Um, a time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to lament and a time to dance. A time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones. A time for embracing and a time to refrain from it, to keep oneself far. It says here, lirchok mechabeik. So to distance oneself, like rachok, far, right? But in this case, it's saying, right, there's a time for embracing and a time when it's inappropriate to do so. A time for seeking and a time for losing. A time when things are abeg could also be like abandoning or, but in this case, we think, to lose something. A time for keeping and a time to discard. And discard is lahashlich, like to like shaliach sibor, right? Like emissary, to send, essentially. But it means discarding. That's a good translation. A time for ripping, likroa. Those who have done for at a funeral for tearing of the ribbon or garment. It's the same verb. So a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time to speak, a time for loving and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So there are these times for what? For everything, right? All of these are natural processes. This isn't the Deuteronomic historian. For those of you who are also here for Kings and for the class we've been doing on the books of the prophets, this is not that guy where it's like there's an easy way to judge exactly these are the good things and this is how God does things and this is how, like, it's not so black and white. All of these things are, again, of God is a bad translation, is not what I mean, because it's not like God sending them to you specifically, but they're all things that are ordained by God. In other words, preordained by, meaning God has said these are the things that will happen in your world. I mean, you can go back, if you want to go back um, to Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel for the reasoning for the suffering. You can do that if you really want. But there is suffering, and there is also good things. There's mending, there's peace, there's love, there's dancing. But this really encompasses. Is there human experience you don't think is encompassed by the scope of this poem?
I think it's comforting because it covers all of our humanness. And so when I'm having a hard time, it's human, right? So
Sure.
that's comforting to me. So
Yes, there's something comforting, I think, in that it covers so much of the human
Right.
experience. Um, it, yeah,
Is it the rabbinic position that no matter what experience, one can have growth and become more compassionate and closer to God?
sure. I mean, I think part of why we study Kohelet is that there's a serenity that's yielded by the. I don't know how I would make this a verb. Kohelet, like make an adverb out of Kohelet's name. Kohelicize. That's not good. I won't do it. In any way, in order to live one's life is as if that were your philosophy, the equivalent of being a Maimonidean or being an Aristotelian. If you arranged your life according to Kohelet, you would probably have a lot more serenity as part of it, because there's a lot more. Part of Kohelet's wisdom is the acceptance of things that can't be changed. And there's truisms and different phrases along those lines, because pretty much all cultures that have wisdom in them come to this understanding at some point that you must have some formula to deal with the full scope of human experience, or else people will be like, well, why does my faith not speak to this thing that's deeply either great or destructive to me personally, to my soul? And that's kind of, again, it's part of the theme of what Kohelet's talking about. Like in the first part, where he was talking mostly about how we work and we suffer, and sometimes we preoccupy ourselves with hevel, with vapor that dissipates and becomes nothing, when really what we could have been doing would have been more beneficial to our souls and the struggle that we all equally face as human beings for purpose and for meaning and for and to see oneself as having lived a life worth living. That's essentially his that. So that's what he starts with, and here he's saying this is like that, in that we're all searching for answers to questions related to the human experience. Um, and again, he's going to go into why next. This is just him setting out this, essentially, starting by saying, just so everyone understands, God ordains that all these things be possible for you. Not that everyone will exactly have every single one of these things in their life. Some of them we say, hopefully you won't, right? We love for you to have none of the negative things, and we'd love for you to have all of the positive things, but that's naive, and we all know that. So instead, we look at this and just be able to see that these are the range of human experiences, and he's laying that out, and he's wise enough to be able to lay that out for us in a way that we can look at it and understand it that way.
You think this is why the Rolling Stones adopted this?
Is this the Rolling Stones? I keep saying the Carpenters. The Birds?
Birds.
The Birds? Okay, I'm
Birds.
sorry. The Birds. Okay. I keep saying that. Okay, great. I mean, I think, yeah, first of all, I think there's a lot about the season in which they wrote it that spoke to them about this, especially a time of civil strife and war. And I mean, not that these things, they recur a lot. But in the time they wrote it, I believe, yeah, they probably took a lot of solace from this. I think it speaks to people, especially in those times when they're struggling. Okay, so we've got then, and Roger, again, if you want to say anything, just go ahead, and I can't like, you're like behind a bar on my screen, so like just shout or something if you want to be heard. I'm happy to yield. Okay, so we'll move to verse 9, and if we need to go back to the different things. So, right, in light of this perspective that all worldly matters are arranged, Kohelet reiterates his question on the benefit and purpose of the world. And Kohelet asks, what value then can those who labor get from what they earn? Or what is the advantage of the doer in his toils? I have observed the business that God gave humankind to be concerned with. God brings everything to pass precisely at its time. God also puts eternity in their mind. But without people ever guessing, from first to last, all the things that God brings to pass. So we understand from this that well, let me get to the end of this and then thus I realized that the only worthwhile thing there is for them is to enjoy themselves and do what is good in their lifetime. Right? Also, that whenever people do eat and drink and get the enjoyment out of all their wealth, it is the gift of God. Right? Matat Elohim hi. So let's go over this section here. So he's saying, yes, we see that there are all these times. And I see that among all these things, this is not really what people always are concerned with. What are they concerned with? They're concerned with the future. Putting eternity in their mind, essentially, but without people ever guessing from first to last all of the accomplishments that God has accomplished, essentially, is what it says here. All of the they don't understand what the future holds. They can't fathom it. But that's what we do. We constantly are thinking about, well, the future. What is my future going to be? What are my children's future going to be? What is the Jewish people's future going to be? What is America's future going to be? We're so concerned with 50 years from now. Right? Whether we're 10 or we're 60 or we're 80 or what have you, we're concerned with 50 years from now. And he's like, okay, but right? So then he says, thus I realized, right? Since you're not going to be able to know what's going to happen, the only thing that is good for people is to enjoy what they have and to do good during their life, right? It's not just like hedonism. He's not saying, right, get a bunch so that you can acquire and consume and enjoy and just, right? Because he said in the first chapters, he said that I tried that and that was hevel. That wasn't the answer, right? So it's really, when he's saying enjoy what you've got, he's saying be satisfied with your portion, which again is what the rabbis will repeat as the person who is rich is one who is satisfied in their portion. Why? Because if you have enough for you, then you have enough for you.
Don't they also add that you then do mitzvot?
Well, that's the thing. And so he's adding here, and the important thing is not just about money and things and what you have, but that you do good in the world, because that will make your soul, that will be good for your soul. And between money and between sustaining yourself and doing good for your soul, that's all that there is to do good in the world.
Or we are rich in proportion to that which we do not want.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so he's saying you can make the choice to be and also to actually rejoice in it is different. Like, it's not just be satisfied. It's to say, like, imagine, even if you're not that wealthy, if you have a big family meal and you bring something together so that you're all there and having a great time, like, that's the kind of thing it's just finding a way to celebrate. I think a lot of the line from he's not Jewish at all. From Jethro in the Prince of Egypt movie. It's almost Passover, so I get to talk about the Prince of Egypt movie. Great movie, cartoon movie, but it's really good. Val Kilmer, a bunch of people. It's really actually a lot of stars in it now that I think about it. But it's a cartoon movie. And the Prince of Egypt has a song in which Jethro, says, when all you've got is nothing, there's a lot to go around. And they live a life of joy and contentment in their portion, which seems possible for nomadic people, perhaps in ways that like when you're nomadic, you can't carry that much with you. But is really kind of the ethos that I think Kohelet is talking about here. It doesn't really matter how much you have. It could be a lot. It could be very little. It could be a medium amount. It doesn't really matter, because anyone at any level can rejoice in their own portion and do good things in the world and do mitzvot. Anyone can do that.
I
Yeah.
presume George Gershwin was Jewish.
Yeah.
And he wrote the song, "I've got plenty of nothing and nothing's plenty for me."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. All the big show tunes were Jewish for a while.
Well, he's the best in my opinion.
It's certainly a legend. Anyway, I'm not a theater expert, so but in any event, yeah,
Aaron Copland was also German.
plenty of good Jews in the theater world.
But there's also Hoagie Carmichael, who wasn't a member of the tribe, and he wrote some beautiful music.
You don't have to be a member of the tribe to do virtuous things.
Very true. Okay, so we got here. So again, that's what he's saying. Thus, I realized that the only thing worthwhile for them is to enjoy themselves and do what is good. And also that whenever people get to, I just think it's good to add. The last bit we read was that also, each person who eats and drinks and sees good in all his work, that's the gift of God. Just being able to be, that's a gift from God, to just be able to have a stable like a stable life. Now, of course, for a long time it was very easy for the Jews to aspire to merely a standard stable life, because the Jews were being kicked out of everywhere and constantly, this generation would move here, but the next generation would have to get out. And so, especially for European Jewish communities, it was, this was very aspirational. Today, some people would look at it almost maybe as paternalistic or provincial or what have you, to say, oh, all you should aspire to is a average, standard, stable existence, right? You shouldn't aspire to be, it's specifically saying you should not aspire to be a famous whatever, Instagram star or whatever. If you are, then okay, not that you can't do it, but that's not what Kohelet is suggesting will bring happiness. But it's not meant to be provincial, because it also means, if you made a lot or whatever, then you should enjoy that too. It's not that you shouldn't.
In those polarities that they talked about, there's not one that says a time for stability and a time for chaos, but that is what happened.
Well, yeah, time for war and a time for peace, a time for, I mean, the idea is that most of these, they're set up to be like the idea, there's a word for it, I can't remember. I don't want to say the wrong one because I've done that already today. But there are essentially those pairs are meant to encompass a range. And using the pair is meant to tell you that it actually means the whole range, not that it's just those two examples. So yes, but technically, I think the rabbis would say, well, they kind of meant that. Somewhere in one of the total ranges of all of these things, they meant that too. Because Kohelet means everything. If he meant to mean it, if it was smart, he meant it, and it was there. So that's the way it goes. I can't, Okay. Yadati, I also realized or knew too that whatever God has brought to pass will recur evermore. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. Right? That's one of the top rules, by the way, of Torah interpretation, of Torah scholarship, is that you can't add to Torah or subtract from Torah. So if Torah says something, you can't say Torah doesn't say it. And if Torah does say something or doesn't say something, you can't say that it does. If I said the same thing twice, I mean the opposite. You get it. But if I didn't, then great. Okay. So nothing can be taken from it. And God has brought to pass that mortals feel reverence. And isn't that interesting? I find that particularly interesting. Because we have this free will, right? But it's almost like there's some, it's not even a fail-safe because it doesn't quite work 100%, but there's something that pulls us. There's something that, because of the way the world is, draws us towards God. And it's this awe, this fear of our place in the world being so small and our lack of understanding of it that causes the feeling of reverence for God, the only entity that knows and plans the world. Yeah, that's basically what the commentator says too. And then Kohelet says, what is occurring occurred long since. And we got this phrasing in the first chapter. And what is to occur occurred long since. And God seeks the pursued. Near Daf. Yeah, it's near Daf. God inquires almost of the pursued.
What does that mean?
Here, the pursued is one who's pursuing the life that God is seeking for you to live. And so what it means when God inquires of them, it's kind of like, what do you need? How can I help? And so the translation that they do in English here is seeks, which is kind of the same as inquests, but he says yivakesh, which is very clearly ask, right? Not seek. But seek works in this case because the semantic meaning is essentially seek. God is trying to help this person who is in need of help, and but we get this phrasing also here. This same I'm trying to see. There's a note. Meaning of parts of this verse uncertain. No kidding. I made it up. I thought of it. I didn't make it up. I thought of it. But yeah, what is occurring occurred long since, or that which was already is, and that which will be already was. Which we kind of understand what it means, right? Right. Ein chadash tachat hashamayim, which he says there's not, which he says in, which he'll say again shortly, but right. Verse 16. And indeed, I have observed under the sun, alongside justice, there is wickedness. Alongside righteousness, there is wickedness. Um, right, and this is a condemnation of saying there can be a time, I pray it's not now in our world, but um, where even your judicial system can be turned to dispense only wickedness. Which, I mean, it's possible. And then Amarti, I mused, it says, God will doom both righteous and wicked, for there is a time for every experience and for every happening. Right? So everyone will have their just desert, so to speak. So I decided, as regard human beings, to dissociate from the divine beings and to face the fact that they are animals. Right? I mean, it's kind of like, look, when you think about it, we live, we die. We're not like angels or like, like there is the comparison and some like this idea that we're like angels in how our form is so much more specific and our brains are so much more developed than animal that like we're closer to. And he's like, we're kind of more like, kind of less like angels. But we do talk, and other animals don't talk.
That's been refuted over and over again. If you can get the frequencies and run them through a computer, whales talk and they have quite a language, and so do dolphins.
Fair enough, but they can't take over the land. So,
well, that's not their domain. But if we tried to establish a culture in the ocean, then they'd be in a superior position.
Fair enough. I won't debate our possibility of creating ocean civilization over the whales. I just don't have it in me. He says, for in respect of the fate of humans and the fate of animals, they have one and the same fate. As the one dies, so dies the other, and both have the same life breath. Humans have no superiority over animals, since both amount to Havel. Right?
I've already said earlier that everything is Havel in terms of permanence.
And that's what he said. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
About superiority. When he says that humans don't have superiority over animals, is he referring to superiority in every way, or is he referring to superiority just with respect to living and dying?
So he's saying that death is the ultimate, since that's the ultimate fate of all living things, he's saying in that way we are essentially equal. He's not really saying that human beings and animals should be morally equal in weight. That's not, I wouldn't say that's what he's saying. But he is saying essentially that even though we have much more impressive achievements, and we have culture, and we built the pyramids and composed great music and developed higher order mathematics, etc., as the commentator says, we are unable to remove the decree of death hovering over our heads, as all members of the kingdom of the living are unable to avoid such a fate. And so, since both are mortal, both in the end are Hevel, are Havel. We're vapor, dust, whatever. And that's, again, we got to take it in the end in the scope of everything else he's saying. It's not a one-off. Like, I'm not a fan of taking one verse of text anywhere and saying this is what we should think about, like humanity or something. Like it's not really meant to say this is how you should value humans and animals. Kohelet's not even telling you not to eat meat, so clearly he's not like we shouldn't end their lives for the sake of, like, he's not even a vegetarian, as far as I can tell. Maybe there's a midrash and he's a vegetarian and I'm an idiot, but I don't think so. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's specifically trying to make this point about us. I don't think the point is really about the animals.
Kohelet is Shlomo, and
Yeah.
he was a king. We would have been noted somewhere if he was a vegetarian.
Maybe you would think. Uh, um, so here in verse 20, Hakol holech el makom echad. They all go to one place. They both go to the same place. Everyone goes to the same place. Hakol haya min ha'afer, hakol shav el ha'afar. And both came from the dust, ashes. Efer is ash. Both came from the dust and both returned to dust. Who knows if the life breath of humans does rise upward and if the breath of animals does sink down into the earth, right? There's this idea that we have different spirits, that the animals have like a ruach hachayim, which is like a really low level soul, kind of like just like the spirit of life, whereas humans have nefashot. We have souls, real souls, but those are a different order from animal souls. There's an idea. This is an idea. This is what he's referring to.
But he seems to be saying, who knows?
Yes, no, that's right. He's just referring to that idea and saying, but who knows, right? We don't really know. We've been told that this is the way it is, but we don't really know. Most people don't think about it, in other words. You know, something dies, it's dead. It's alive, it's alive. They don't really think about the kind of metaphysical, spiritual, I wonder if this soul has ascended and made aliyah to God, or whether it's like sunken into the, like, he's like, most people also don't, that's not relevant to they don't know and they don't even care, is kind of what he's saying. He says in verse 22, I saw that there is nothing better for people than to enjoy their possessions, since that is their portion. For who can enable them to see what will happen afterward? Right?
That's a theme that goes all through this. I mean, even
Yes.
at the end,
Right. It is the theme that very much runs through entirely through Kohelet, is this idea that he has the answer for you as to how to live a life that's best for your soul. He has this is his self-help guide, essentially. This is his guide for the perplexed, in some ways. Of course, Guide for the Perplexed is meant to teach you Torah. This guy is essentially saying, look, if you're interested in Torah, if that's your thing, great. But if it's not, do your thing and be good at it and contribute to the world and your family and your community and enjoy what you have managed to get out of that, whether it's a lot or a little, but enjoy it, and you'll be happy. Even though bad things will happen to you and good things will happen to you, all these different things will happen to you. If you can manage these two things, you can be happy. And nobody else can, is essentially what he's saying. I tried everything, and this is the only thing that works. I was king. I could do everything. You might say, yeah. If you were rich, you'd be able to do all kinds of things, and then you'd be really happy. And he's like, I'm Solomon. I have a whole room made of gold. I'm as rich as anyone. I did all the frivolous things that rich people do, and it didn't help. Right? He's like, I could be a poor person. I could live like a rich person or a poor person or whatever. I had the opportunity to try and be everything. And there's only one thing that works. So we're still struggling with this today, but King Solomon, Zichrono Livracha, seems to think, I probably got it wrong because I should have said Sadiq in there, because anyway, maybe there's a special one for royalty that I'm not thinking of. But in any event, so he does come back to this point very often, because again, he's trying to explain that to you, that he both understands your concern, your metaphysical, your moral, your spiritual concerns, and that there's still only one way. Like, no, whatever your reason for doing things differently would be, he's like, okay, but I'm telling you that's not going to work, because you say, oh well, I have to do this higher purpose thing even if I'm suffering and not spending any time doing anything good for my community. Like I gotta go and work at I don't mean to diss hedge fund people. I'm sure they're very nice and also very wealthy. So if you want to donate to my synagogue, I promise to stop talking bad about you. But like if you're a hedge fund guy, they're kind of like, yes, hedging, exactly. I'm good at hedging too. I could be in a hedge fund, just verbal hedging. But yeah, so like they're saying like you could be a hedge fund guy. It's like, yeah, you make like millions of dollars a year. Good for you. But you're not doing anything. I mean, we're assuming he's not, you're not doing mitzvah. You're not, you're not enjoying the fruit of your labor because you work 20 hours a day. Maybe one day they will when they're super rich and supervising, and then they will. But for now, they do. And he's saying this person is soul crushing themselves, because they do nothing for their soul, and instead they're purely a sponge that gets that exists to be wrung out. So he has a condemnation of it's not just about how being poor sucks, which is true. He also says that like he's also like, look, it's also not great to be poor, but he's like being rich is not a solution for this problem. Being frivolous isn't a solution for this problem. The only solution for the problem of the soul, which is a problem he's very acutely aware of as a person of great both knowledge and discernment, is to do these things, is to do good and to rejoice in your portion. And if you can do those things, then it doesn't really matter what you do because you're doing what you're supposed to do and you'll enjoy it. You could be a hedge fund guy and then also like coach your kids' soccer team and go to shul every week. And you probably qualify. Like, I mean, you probably qualify for Kohelet. Like, again, it's not, he doesn't care if you're a hedge fund guy. I'm not trying, he wants you to also knows that for the betterment of your soul, for you to feel good, for you to not struggle in this pit of a miasma of despair that crushes your soul, you need to have these things. You need to be engaged in good works, in other words, mitzvot, and you need to be engaged in the other thing. Excuse me. Right, rejoicing in one's portion. Sometimes I speak for too many words and then I just forget what all words are.
Is it possible to do what's one's portion and have inadvertently it turn out to be evil? Because Einstein was asked at the end of his life, what did you think? He said, if I had to do it again, I'd been a plumber. He was quite concerned about how people were using E equals MC squared.
Well, I mean, so it's hard to draw these examples from the superlative, like from the very extraordinary. Those people kind of defy, it's like, should Einstein have done benefit? Like it's hard to, if you got random dude who works at Washburn and said, should he have been a professor in that would be a more accurate depiction of this probably than Einstein, who developed, like he says that, but he doesn't mean it, right? That's another thing. We know he doesn't mean it. Einstein didn't mean that. He wanted to be Einstein. If you could choose to be Einstein, you'd choose to be Einstein. He did a lot of good for the world, and he knows it, and he knew it. I think he knew very well. I don't think he would have I think that's one of the things you can say once you're already Einstein. You can say, oh yes, if I could have gone back, I wouldn't have done it that way. But you can only say that once you become Einstein, once you become a extraordinary historical figure.
He may have been referring to the letter to Roosevelt that caused the Manhattan Project.
I mean, thank God they did it. So
yes, if Hitler had
right,
it,
and right, I'm just saying, like it's like it's again like he wants to write. It's like Truman with Oppenheimer. It's like, okay, so he's a little bit of a crybaby. He was still a pretty good guy. I'm talking about Einstein now. I don't really know Oppenheimer that well. Although he had his moments too. But in any event, he'd have chosen to be Einstein.
Well, I would argue that an evil person would not necessarily be doing this. I think they would not be satisfied like what Kohelet is
Evil
saying.
people seldom.
They need
satisfy
more,
themselves.
yeah.
Also, Kohelet might see an evil person as being twisted in such a way that this advice wouldn't be relevant for them in any way, because they don't have any interest in the repair and healing of their and development of their own soul. I mean, that's not a concept to an evil. I think of the architecture, sorry, like of Star Wars almost, of like Sith and Jedi, this idea of a total evil and a totally neutral opposite side. And I think he's conceiving of that kind of being the spectrum in a way. And if you're really evil and stuff, if you're on that side of things, you're probably not at all interested in anything about the soul. You care much more maybe about power and riches and dominating other people and I don't know, whatever your interests are, they're not going to you're not looking to Kohelet for advice on this because you've fed your soul with something so, like we say, mitzvah gerera mitzvah, and the same like doing a mitzvah leads to doing another mitzvah, whereas doing a sin leads to doing another sin.
But how can you say that the most evil person in the world is not tormented? That may be the driving force.
They may be I certainly would hope they would be tormented, but
Yeah, so what I'm saying
yeah.
is this can apply equally
Mhm.
to them.
Mhm.
They have a need, whether they do this.
I agree
but they
that it
have
would
a
be
need.
best for them to do this and to first of all stop being evil, and second of all to orient themselves around this framework. That would be best for them, no doubt. And Kohelet would agree that would be the best thing for them. I think he just knows that's they're unlikely to follow. Where Judaism is a set of paths essentially, and he knows that they're unlikely to follow his path if they're not, unless they've turned from the path of. Now again, people can repent to their last day, and if they do repent, they could be on his path. But if they're on his path, they're not. You know what I mean? Unless they're turning to his path, they're already on. You know, they're the evil are not looking for his path, unless they are met with some kind of need, either internal or forced on them from external forces to change. Otherwise, they're not going. I mean, we see this. Evil people rarely change. Their motivations don't lend that to them changing. It happens sometimes, but it's not common.
But people grow. I mean,
Yeah.
look at Bloomberg. Okay, I'm sure in those early years when he was developing his little terminal that made him a billionaire.
Yeah.
That's what he was focusing on. He had to be the best to get in there ahead of the competitors and have all the stockbrokers buy his little gizmos and such.
Mhm.
And once he became a billionaire, he started doling it out to good causes.
Absolutely.
But when he was so busy building that, I don't think he spent a lot of time dwelling on.
Well, remember that Kohelet said in the first chapter that young people are unlikely to encounter this question. They're going to be so busy, they're going to busy themselves so much that essentially that they're not going to feel that torment. They're going to be so busy that most of them are not going to be particularly interested in this question yet. He notices that this is something that develops over the course of your life. Now, again, in your 30s is probably when it would start, I would imagine. But he kind of suggests that it's not something that that we are always, you don't get a lot of 15-year-olds who are like, gee, I just don't know how to live with what my life will be and the impact of what I do on my soul. Like it just doesn't, maybe they might exist. They sound very pious and nice, but not that many is Kohelet's point. Yeah.
Not on their soul, but in terms of what's driving them. So they may want to become the greatest basketball player ever and have dreams of getting to KU as a scholarship on the basketball team and then the NBA. But it's the same driving force, is what I'm saying. And most of them fail.
Sure, they do.
They don't reach the NBA and get their huge salaries. In the same way, when people are younger and they've been pushed to go in a certain direction, they may rebel against it because it's not what they want, or they may pursue it. Einstein's family were all electrical engineers and had a successful business, which they wanted him to come into, and he refused. He enjoyed the scholarly work. It was much more of a challenge. So what drove him to do that? We don't know, but it's something that, a question of where people get satisfaction, and being so limited in their vision. I'm no good unless I continue down this narrow path. And I think this whole book is saying, look around you, look at the gifts, look at the gifts you have.
It certainly is. It certainly is suggesting that. It's also, I mean, I think that there's drive and what people choose to be focused on. Kohelet is not saying you like, again, he's not saying what he's not saying. He's only saying what he is saying. And what he is saying is this is the way to deal with this problem, which I have noticed. He starts the book defining the problem, saying everything in life is futile because generations come and go and the sun rises and sets and nothing ever really changes, and our lives don't change the existence or the natural states of the world. And there's nothing new. Even if you think there's something new, it's not, because it happened and we just forgot about it because there's been so much time. And the things that happen are cyclical in nature, essentially. They even if they don't, they're not the same, they rhyme. And so he's saying, if you're concerned with this problem, this is the solution. He presents the solution. If you're not concerned with this problem, to be fair, I think he would also say there are people, and I'm not, this is not like, I don't mean to be like comedians when they're like people who don't get the joke are stupid, but, or TV show people when they say that people like with Westworld where people don't get our twists are stupid. But he's kind of saying there are going to be people who won't care. They're not going to have this kind of problem. They're just not. They're not ever going to really deal with this. Maybe because they're not smart enough. Maybe they never dealt with it enough. Maybe they're not spiritually developed enough. Whatever it is, I don't think he thinks everyone's going to suffer from this, or even understand that they're suffering from it. But for those who come to him, again, he starts in a very way that's like, "You have come to me for wisdom, right? And I'm going to lay out for you this ultimate case." The ultimate wisdom I have understood is this is a problem that affects us all eventually. This soul, this dealing with our mortality and how we exist in a world where we are mortal and the world continues without us and is not ever permanently changed, even by a figure such as Solomon, who we all still know today, thousands of years later. It's still Hevel. So how do we deal with that problem? He lays out the answer. If you have that problem, he has the answer for you. If you don't have that problem, he assumes you're not even looking for him, quite frankly. You wouldn't have opened the book if you didn't have the problem. But if you do develop the problem, having this book is having the solution in hand. Now, some of us will develop it at 20. Some of us will develop it at 38. Some of us will develop it at 70. There are different times. Most of us, I think, will develop this question of impermanence and mortality, and Hevel, and how we can feel good about life while we're living it, which is exactly what God wants of us and what Kohelet gives us a path to be able to do.
Enjoy the journey.
Right.
Instead of
Right.
the destination.
Right, instead of the focus, because focus on destinations is a lot of what we do in our work and stuff, right? And that's fine, and there are many destinations for many different kinds of things, but this is a way to solve what he sees as maybe the greatest problem of the human soul. And I don't, if you got to be looking for it, though, you got to identify the problem, and if you have it, then you've got to go about rectifying it. Not everybody does, but I imagine most people in this room have at least thought about it. So okay, we will continue with chapter 4. I think we'll get through it. Chapter 4, I further observed all the oppression that goes on under the sun. Right? So I looked again and I kept seeing it. The tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and their oppressor's power with none to comfort them. So there's a lot of evil and pain. Not that the oppressor's power needs to be comforted, but again, there's no one to comfort. I see that those who are afflicted are crying and upset, but there's no one to comfort them. And I see that there are those with more power who abuse it, and there's no one to comfort their victims. Then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living. Right? And happier than Roger.
How's that different than saying it's better to be dead than alive?
That's essentially what he's not saying that's going to be the case in the very end, but he's saying in a certain metaphysical sense, yes, because the dead no longer suffer from living in a world filled with evil and sin. Right. They don't suffer, and less suffering is better. So he's saying in some way it would be better, but he's not really saying it'd be better to be dead than alive. But you could say that. Think about how in Talmud we say so much where the Talmud says, well, you could say, but we know they're saying that because they're going to say, but don't say that, because that's not what we mean. And that's I just want you to take that into account for this when he's saying, then I counted them that. And then he says, and happier than either the living or the dead are those who have not yet come into being and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun. And he's kind of right about that too, right? Because the soon-to-be born or babies have all the potential. They might yet live in the greatest world anyone has yet developed. Their children are all potential. Whereas adults see a diminishing amount of potential as they go on. That he's just laying out here this part of the human experience. So he's not really saying it'd be better to be dead than alive. He's saying that it seems like in the metaphysical race for who has the most potential versus the most suffering that they'll encounter, the soon-to-be born are the top, then the dead, then the currently living adults, is basically what he's saying. But this is a ranking of potentiality, not a moral judgment that it's best to be dead and second best to be not yet born and third best to be alive right now.
It's also true that we don't have a hell of a choice. We're here where we're here.
Right, exactly. That's also true. We have to just accept we don't have a choice which one of those states we're in. At one point, we'll be in all of them. So if you feel like, oh, well, if he says that, well, he knows at one point you're going to be all three of these. At one point you were not yet born. At one point you were an adult or are, and at one point you will be dead. We all will be. He's just being very matter of fact about that. He says, I have also noted that all labor and skillful enterprise come from people's envy of one another. Another futility in pursuit of wind, right? We get that. Most people are motivated by, he essentially, Kohelet discovered capital, he didn't implement it, but he discovered capitalism 2,500 years, 2,800 years before Adam Smith. So great, he's super brilliant. He said, I see that what most motivates people is competition. And I see that they're jealous of each other and they want to one up each other. But of course, it doesn't really matter what they gather because they can only use it for as long as they have. And if they don't enjoy it while they're here, they'll end up amassing a bunch of wealth to just leave. Remember, he said back in the first chapter to leave to some dumb kid who will lose it all. Because, you know, that's the way of the world. And he saw that kind of happen to him too, or it would happen to him. So he says, so fools, it is true that fools fold their hands together and have to eat their own flesh. Goodness. Right. A fool is one that doesn't work and therefore doesn't have money for food, and ultimately doesn't literally eat himself, but eats away at his own potential and all that until he is nothing, essentially. But no less truly, better is a handful of gratification than two fistfuls of labor that is pursuit of, again, herding wind here. Re'ut ruach, this idea that you're just right. We said you're like trying to herd cats. We say today is it's futile to do such a thing. So that's why you said, you know, and right. So it's better to, right. It's better to take a little bit and to do a little bit of work and have a little bit of enjoyment than to work your tail off for what exactly? Instead of one period of work and one period of enjoyment, you got 2 periods of work. But that's all you got, is what he's saying. You didn't get really anything additionally for that. Because one portion of work, he's saying, would have been enough, right? You'd have made a living. You'd have still been happy. You could have been happy. And I have noted this further futility under the sun. So I'm thinking again about the world. And once again, I have to think about something that's bad that we have to work through. So there's the case of a man who is alone with no companion, who has neither son nor brother. Yet he amasses wealth without limit, and his eye is never sated with riches. For whom now is he amassing it while denying himself enjoyment? That too is a futility and an unhappy business. 2 are better off than 1, in that they have greater benefit from their earnings. See, it's just like, did Adam Smith rip this off? I'm just kidding. No. Did he rip this off for his Wealth of Nations? I don't. Okay.
Learned from it.
Right. So you know, 2 are better off than 1, and they have greater benefit. 2 people can work together to earn a greater profit than the sum of their solitary efforts. Right. We know this. It's called corporation. Again, Adam Smith.
Cooperation, which is
well, in this case, I think it's corporation. It's people working for their benefit, not everyone's benefit. For should they fall, one can raise the other, but woe to someone who is alone and falls with no companion to assist. Right? The benefits of partnership go beyond the financial benefit.
Are you aware that Lyra Carroll wrote a song?
I wasn't, no.
You need to check it out.
Okay. On this verse? On these verses?
2 are better than 1, yeah.
Oh, okay. If we have an album in the library, I'm happy to take a listen. Right. Further, when 2 lie together, they are warm. But how can someone who is alone be warm? Ech yaham. How will he be warm? Right? Also, if someone attacks, two can withstand it. A threefold cord is not readily broken. Right? If you interweave things, they're stronger. It's just what he's saying. But if you're alone, obviously, you're more likely to get beat up. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer has the sense to heed warnings. Wisdom is better than riches and experience, I guess. For the former can emerge from a dungeon to become king, while the latter, even if born to kingship, can become a pauper. Right? Because a fool could be dispossessed of his money, as I think somebody said, not Ben Franklin, somebody older probably. A fool and his money are swiftly parted. I don't remember who said
That
it.
came from Proverbs.
Oh, maybe. If it's so, then he's cribbing himself, and I'm misremembering. But in any event, so a foolish king can become a poor idiot, whereas a wise child can emerge from a dungeon, maybe like him or his father, who were both under guard and persecuted at different times, but become a king. And that would be good because they're wise and wisdom is better than
Solomon's fathers.
right, exactly. He's saying him, his dad, they both were a little bit. He was under guard with his mom when it looked like it was going to be the other person, and then the head of the army and whoever came to get him and made him king instead. Remember, but he was also briefly under guard and became a wise child that emerged to become king.
Once he became king, he didn't seem to have those problems.
No, well, they quickly consolidated power. Remember, all the people that were at the other one left that other coronation and came to his, deciding that it wasn't it was going to be him instead. So very quickly he consolidated power and got rid of his brother, and they were ready to move on with Solomon as king at that point. Right? Because bad kings and good kings, they're important. However, I reflected about all the living who walk under the sun with that youthful successor who steps into his place. Right? Their hopes were placed in their children, as each generation invests great effort in the succeeding one, hoping that it will be more successful than its predecessor. Unnumbered are the multitudes of all those who preceded them, and later generations will not acclaim him either. For that too is futile and right, Rayon ruah in this case, an idea or an empty notion. It says pursuit of wind again, but I like empty notion better. And we get Hevel again. So it's Hevel, right? Right? So they have these great expectations of children. We see this, and then the children grow up, and then they're adults, and then we don't anymore. We move on to having great expectations in the next children, and we're always happy to have a 30 under 30 list, right? They don't do 60 under 60 lists. No purpose in it. We don't look at potential that way in our culture. It's his criticism, but he's saying we don't necessarily think about it that way. And also we said there are people who came before, and they're also we're focused on the now. We're very focused on the potential that we can bring to throw our hats over the wall and have a new generation, supplant us, and hopefully, we hope for them, do even better than we did, make even more progress. But we throw them over us. And then when they're over us, it'll be time for them to throw someone over them. Be not overeager to go to the house of God. More acceptable is obedience than the offering of fools, for they know nothing but to do evil. I like this is just like a one-off. It's totally its own. Like if you're gonna go to the temple, you should just sit there and listen to the Torah and listen to the learning and learn. And learning I like this, and the rabbis will love this. Learning is better than fools giving. A foolish person learning, a person learning is better than a foolish person coming into the temple and just paying for an offering, having it done and leaving. Because they don't change anything about themselves. They don't think anything about themselves. Right? They're just there, okay, I showed up, I bought a goat, they did the goat, we ate the goat, I'm going home.
What about the
But they don't think about God.
what about the ultra orthodox who doesn't have a job, lives off welfare, but goes and studies every waking hour?
So,
Where do they fit in here?
different points of history, rabbis would say different things. Obviously, there was a point in time in history where the rabbis would say, obviously, every man needs to have a parnasa, has to have a job, a salary. In this modern point where we have the state of Israel, the rabbis of these yeshivot are very clear that no ultra-Orthodox man should ever do anything that isn't study, because study brings the Mashiach. Again, this is here it's saying that you should study. So I think that there are obviously limits and boundaries, and I agree with Rashi and with Maimonides, who think that a rabbi even should have other means coming in, should try and find a way, even if that way is just by serving a community and they paying for his parnasa. But that a rabbi should, that's even a job. These yeshiva students don't do that. They're not rabbis in the sense of them serving people. They're rabbis in the sense of them just sitting and learning and thinking, which is also not that it doesn't have value. I wish we had a little bit of that in our form of Judaism. But there's limiting principles. And when you say no one in your whole community that makes up a large chunk of a population of a country with conscription should ever do anything to assist that country besides studying Torah, which we can disagree about whether it's an actual help to the country. They argue there's a religious, metaphysical, they are strengthening the army and the state by their study, that their study gives zechut, gives honor to the state of Israel, and therefore God lets them win battles and things. So they take the responsibility for victory, not on the soldiers who are shouldering the stretcher, or getting under the stretcher in this moment, but as the Israelis would say, but rather with that it's due to their religious devotion that Israel is successful. Now, the thing about religious claims like that is there's no scientific way to prove that they're right or wrong, and they're obviously going to say they're right and think they're right. Many will also say and think they're wrong. That's a debate people are going to have. I hope Israelis have it, and I hope it comes out to a way that's favorable to us, but and to the state of Israel. But yeah, I'm not sure. That's all I can say about that. Okay, but yes, so that right. So does anyone have any further thoughts? We did our 2 chapters, which seems to be a good amount. There are 12 chapters only of Kohelet, and we've now done 4.
And the third.
We've done that. I thank you first, I'm going to say thank you to the people on YouTube. We appreciate you attending and learning some Kohelet with us. If you find it useful, please, like and subscribe and all of that. And also maybe,